Sophie Mitchell checked her reflection one more time in the lobby's glass doors. Her navy blazer was slightly worn at the cuffs, but she hoped no one would notice. At 26, she had imagined herself further along in life. Instead, here she stood outside Sterling Enterprises in downtown Chicago, clutching a folder with her resume, praying this interview would change everything. 3 months had passed since. Her marketing position at a small firm disappeared overnight. Budget cuts, they said. Nothing personal. But it felt personal when her rent was overdue and her savings account showed a balance that made her stomach turn. This interview was not just another opportunity, it was her lifeline. The building towered above her, all steel and glass reflecting the autumn sky. Sophie took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and walked through the revolving doors. The lobby was enormous, with marble floors so polished she could see her nervous expression looking back at her. People in expensive suits moved with purpose, their confidence filling the space. The unexpected COA receptionist directed Sophie to the 20th floor. Her hands trembled slightly as she pressed the elevator button. She had researched Sterling Enterprises thoroughly. They were major players in digital marketing and brand development. Landing a job here would not just pay her bills. It would launch her career into an entirely different stratosphere. The elevator doors opened to reveal a sleek office space with floor-to-ceiling windows. Overlooking the city, a young assistant greeted her with a professional smile and led her down a hallway lined with awards and accolades. They stopped at a corner office with frosted glass doors. "Mr. Hayes will see you now," the assistant said. Knocking twice before opening the door, Sophie walked in and felt her breath catch. Jonathan Hayes stood by the window, silhouetted against the bright afternoon light. When he turned to face her, she was struck by how young he seemed for a CEO. He could not have been older than 33. With dark hair swept back from his forehead and eyes that were an unusual shade of gray-blue. His charcoal suit fit him perfectly, but it was his expression that held her attention. He looked at her with an intensity that made her feel like he was searching for something. "Miss Mitchell," he said, his voice smooth and measured. "Please have a seat." Sophie settled into the leather chair across from his desk, trying to calm her racing heart. Jonathan sat down and opened her resume, studying it silently. The seconds stretched uncomfortably long. "Questions that cut deep. Your last position ended 3 months ago." Jonathan said, finally looking up at her. "That is a significant gap. What have you been doing since then?" Sophie felt heat rise to her cheeks. She had prepared for this question, but his direct gaze made her practiced answer feel hollow. "I've been applying to positions that match my skills," she said carefully. "I've also been taking online courses to improve my digital marketing knowledge and working freelance projects when I can find them." Jonathan nodded slowly. "Freelance projects? Can you tell me about one?" She described a small social media campaign she had managed for a local bakery, turning their Instagram presence around in 6 weeks. As she spoke, she found her confidence returning. This was familiar ground. She knew she was good at her work, even if her circumstances suggested otherwise. "Impressive results with limited resources," Jonathan acknowledged. Then he leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. "But I have to ask, Miss Mitchell. Your resume shows talent, but it also shows instability. 3 jobs in 4 years. Why should I believe you will stay here if I hire you?" The question stung, even though it was fair. Sophie met his eyes directly. "Because I need this," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "Not just the paycheck, though I will be honest that I need that too. I need a place where I can prove what I am capable of. Every job I left before was because I was chasing growth, trying to find somewhere I could really contribute. I think Sterling Enterprises could be that place. I am willing to work harder than anyone else you interviewed today to show you that." Something flickered in Jonathan's expression. He studied her face for a long moment, and Sophie felt an odd sensation, as if he was seeing past her carefully constructed professional demeanor to something deeper. "The strange connection. Tell me about your family," Jonathan said suddenly, shifting the conversation in an unexpected direction. Sophie blinked, caught off guard. "My family. I am not sure how that relates to the position. Humor me." She hesitated, then said, "I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin. My parents run a hardware store. I have one sibling, a sister. Her voice faltered slightly on the last word. She passed away 5 years ago. Jonathan's expression shifted, something like recognition crossing his features. I am sorry for your loss, he said quietly. Then, more carefully, what was her name? Claire, Sophie said, confused by the personal turn the interview had taken. We were twins. Identical. The air in the room seemed to change. Jonathan stood abruptly and walked back to the window, his back to her. Sophie watched him, bewildered and increasingly uncomfortable. Had she said something wrong? Should she not have mentioned Claire? When Jonathan turned back, his face was composed again, but there was something in his eyes she could not read. Miss Mitchell, I am going to make you an offer, he said. A trial period of 30 days. You will work as a junior account manager on one of our key projects. If you perform well, the position becomes permanent, with full benefits. If not, we part ways. Does that interest you? Sophie felt her heart leap. Yes, she said immediately. Absolutely. When would I start? Monday. 8 o'clock sharp. He extended his hand across the desk. When Sophie shook it, she noticed his grip was firm, but his hand trembled ever so slightly. I have a feeling you are going to surprise everyone here, Miss Mitchell. First day revelations. As Sophie rode the elevator back down, her mind spun with questions. The interview had been strange, especially the personal questions about her family. But she had a job, a real chance. That was what mattered. She did not see Jonathan watching her from his office window as she exited the building onto the street below. His assistant, Rachel, appeared at his doorway. That was the Mitchell girl, Rachel said carefully. Are you sure about this, Jonathan? He continued, staring down at Sophie's retreating figure. I have to know, he said quietly. After all these years, I have to know if it is really just a coincidence. Rachel sighed. Claire's been gone for 5 years. Sophie is not her. I know that, Jonathan said, but his voice carried doubt. But when she walked in, for a moment, I thought I was seeing a ghost. They are identical, Rachel. Completely identical. What are you going to tell her? Jonathan finally turned from the window. Nothing. Not yet. Maybe not ever if I can help it. She deserves a fair shot at this job without my past complicating things. Eve. But even as he said it, Jonathan knew it was already complicated. 5 years ago, he had loved Claire Mitchell with everything he had. They had met at a conference, fallen hard and fast, and talked about a future together. Then one rainy night, a drunk driver had taken all of that away. He had spent years trying to move on, burying himself in work, building Sterling Enterprises into the success it was today, and now Claire's identical twin sat in his lobby, signing employment paperwork. Completely unaware that her new boss had once planned to propose to her sister, the weight of secret Sophie filled out form after form, her hand cramping from all the signatures. The HR manager, a kind woman named Patricia, explained benefits and policies with practiced efficiency. Sophie nodded along, but her mind kept drifting back to Jonathan Hayes and the strange way he had looked at her when she mentioned Claire. His entire demeanor had changed. It was probably just sympathy, she told herself. People never knew how to react when you told them your twin had died. The grief was complicated enough without adding others' discomfort to it. Claire had been the bold one, the risk-taker. Sophie had always been more careful, more practical. When Claire moved to Chicago 5 years ago to chase bigger dreams, Sophie had stayed in Wisconsin, playing it safe. Then came the phone call that shattered everything. A car accident. Claire was gone instantly. Sophie had been planning to visit her the following month. She never got the chance to say goodbye. Moving to Chicago 2 years later had been Sophie's way of feeling closer to Claire, of living the adventurous life her sister never got to finish. But the city had been harder than she expected. Jobs were competitive. Rent was crushing. Some days, Sophie wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. But now, walking out of Sterling Enterprises with a signed offer letter in her bag, she felt something she had not felt in months. Hope. Sophie pulled out her phone and looked at her favorite photo of Claire, taken just weeks before the accident. Her sister smiled back at her, full of life and possibility. I got the job, Claire, Sophie whispered. I think things are finally going to turn around. If she had known the truth about Jonathan Hayes and his connection to her sister, she might have walked away right then. But Sophie did not know, not yet. And so she headed home to her tiny apartment, excited about Monday, unaware that she was about to step into a story that had begun 5 years ago, one that had never really ended. Monday morning arrived with pale sunlight filtering through Sophie's apartment window. She had barely slept, her mind racing with anticipation and nerves. By 7 o'clock, she was already dressed in her best professional outfit. A black pencil, skirt, and cream blouse that she hoped projected confidence she did not entirely feel. Sterling Enterprises buzzed with Monday morning energy when Sophie arrived. Rachel, Jonathan's assistant, met her in the lobby and guided her through a maze of departments. The office was even more impressive than Sophie remembered. Creative teams huddled around digital screens. Strategists debated in glass-walled conference rooms, and everywhere she looked, people moved with purpose. "This is your desk," Rachel said, stopping at a workstation near a window with a view of the Chicago skyline. "You will be working on the Horizon Tech account. They are launching a new app in 6 weeks and need a complete marketing strategy. Jonathan wants you to lead the creative development." Sophie felt her stomach drop. Lead the creative development? On her first day? "I thought I would be assisting someone," she said carefully. Rachel smiled, but there was something knowing in her expression. "Jonathan believes in throwing people into the deep end. He thinks it reveals their true capabilities. Your first team meeting is in 20 minutes. Conference Room B." As Rachel walked away, Sophie sank into her chair. This was not a trial period. This was a test, and she suspected Jonathan Hayes had designed it specifically to see if she would sink or swim. Under his watchful eye, the team meeting was intense. Sophie found herself surrounded by 6 other marketing professionals, all of whom had been with Sterling Enterprises for years. They looked at her with barely concealed skepticism when Rachel introduced her as the creative lead. "Sophie will be directing the visual strategy and messaging for Horizon Tech," Rachel explained. "Jonathan has personally assigned her to this project." A woman named Victoria, who appeared to be in her early 40s with perfectly styled red hair, raised an eyebrow. "No offense, but does she have experience with tech launches? Horizon is one of our biggest clients." Before Sophie could respond, the conference room door opened. Jonathan Hayes walked in, and the room immediately fell silent. He wore a navy suit today, and his presence seemed to fill the entire space. "Sophie has exactly the perspective we need," Jonathan said, his voice cutting through the tension. "Fresh eyes, innovative thinking. I expect everyone to support her vision." His gaze swept the room, landing briefly on Sophie. "I will be checking in regularly on progress. I want weekly updates starting Friday." He left as quickly as he had arrived, and Sophie felt the weight of 6 pairs of eyes turn back to her. This was going to be harder than she thought. Late-night revelations the first week was brutal. Sophie worked 12-hour days, researching Horizon Tech's competitors, sketching campaign concepts, and trying to win over a team that clearly resented her sudden leadership role. Victoria, in particular, seemed determined to undermine every suggestion Sophie made by Thursday night. Sophie was alone in the office, staring at her computer screen with burning eyes. The campaign concept felt flat, uninspired. She had 3 more designs to complete before tomorrow's review with Jonathan, and nothing was working. "Still here?" Sophie jumped at the sound of Jonathan's voice. He stood in her doorway, tie loosened, looking as tired as she felt. "Just finishing up," she said, trying to minimize the panic in her voice. Jonathan walked over and glanced at her screen. His proximity made Sophie suddenly aware of how intimate the empty office felt. She could smell his cologne, something woody and expensive. "These are good," he said, surprising her. "But they are playing it safe. Horizon Tech wants to disrupt their industry. Your campaign should feel disruptive too." Sophie felt frustration bubble up. "I am trying," she said, more sharply than she intended. "But it is hard to be disruptive when I am also trying to prove I deserve to be here. Everyone on the team thinks you made a mistake hiring me." Jonathan was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled over a chair and sat down beside her. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. Sophie nodded, caught off guard by the sudden shift in his tone. 5 years ago, I was where you are now, Jonathan said. Not literally, but emotionally. I had just lost someone incredibly important to me. Someone who saw the world differently than everyone else, who was not afraid to take risks. Her death made me realize that playing it safe was the real risk. So I stopped trying to fit in and started trusting my instincts. That is when everything changed. Sophie felt her throat tighten. The person you lost, she said carefully. Were they close to you? Jonathan's jaw tightened. Very close. She was the love of my life. The words hung in the air between them. Sophie wanted to ask more, but something in Jonathan's expression stopped her. Instead, she said, I lost someone too. My twin sister, 5 years ago. She was the brave one. I always felt like I was living in her shadow. Jonathan turned to look at her fully, and Sophie saw something flicker in his eyes. Pain, recognition, something she could not name. What was she like? He asked quietly. Fearless, Sophie said, smiling despite the ache in her chest. She moved to Chicago to chase her dreams. She worked in marketing too, actually. I always wondered if I came here to finish what she started. She did not see the color drained from Jonathan's face, did not notice how his hands clenched into fists, because Sophie was looking at her computer screen already thinking about his advice, about taking risks. You are right, she said suddenly. I have been playing it safe. Let me show you something. She pulled up a sketch she had abandoned earlier, a wild concept that had felt too bold, too risky. Jonathan studied it in silence, and Sophie held her breath. This, he said finally, this is what Horizon Tech needs. Develop this for tomorrow's meeting. He stood to leave, then paused at the door. Sophie, he said, and something in the way he said her name made her look up. You are not living in anyone's shadow. You are exactly where you are supposed to be. After he left, Sophie sat in the quiet office, her heart racing with adrenaline and something else she could not quite identify. The Photograph Friday's meeting went better than Sophie had dared to hope. Her bold concept impressed the team. Even Victoria grudgingly admitted it had potential. Jonathan watched from the back of the room, his expression unreadable, but when the meeting ended, he gave her a small nod of approval. Sophie was riding high on that success when she returned to her desk, found a folder someone had left there. It was marked Sterling Enterprises history and contained old photographs from company events. She flipped through them idly, smiling at pictures of awkward team-building exercises and holiday parties. Then she stopped breathing. The photograph was from 5 years ago. According to the date printed in the corner, it showed a company conference. There in the center of the image was Jonathan Hayes. He looked younger, his smile more carefree. And beside him, with her arm linked through his, was Claire. Sophie's hands shook as she stared at the image. It was definitely her sister, wearing a red dress Sophie remembered her buying. Claire's head was tilted toward Jonathan, laughing at something he had just said. They looked happy. They looked together. Oh my God, Sophie whispered. She frantically flipped through more photos. There were 3 more of Jonathan and Claire together. At a conference. At a dinner? Standing close, clearly more than just colleagues. Rachel appeared at Sophie's desk, holding a stack of files. She saw what Sophie was looking at and went very still. Rachel, Sophie said, her voice shaking. Is this my sister? Was Jonathan with my sister? Rachel set down the files slowly. You should talk to Jonathan about this, she said carefully. Tell me the truth, Sophie demanded. Please. Rachel looked torn, then sighed. Yes. Jonathan and Claire dated for about 8 months, 5 years ago. They met at a marketing conference. He was going to propose to her when she died in that car accident. She paused, her expression sympathetic. He has never really gotten over losing her. The office seemed to tilt around Sophie. Every strange moment from her interview suddenly made horrible sense. Jonathan's personal questions, his intense interest in her background, the way he had looked at her when she mentioned Claire. He hired me because I look like her, Sophie said numbly.
Why?
I do not think that is the only reason, Rachel said gently. But yes, when you walked in for that interview, Jonathan thought he was seeing Claire's ghost. Sophie stood abruptly, the chair rolling back. "Where is he?" "Sophie." "Maybe you should take some time to process this before." But Sophie was already walking toward Jonathan's office. The photographs clutched in her hand. She did not knock. She simply opened the door and walked in. Jonathan was on the phone, but immediately ended the call when he saw her face. "Sophie," she threw the photographs onto his desk. "You knew," she said, her voice breaking. "You knew Claire was my sister, and you hired me anyway." "What is this, Jonathan? Some kind of sick attempt to replace her?" The truth comes out. Jonathan stood slowly, his face pale. "It is not like that," he said. "Then what is it like?" Sophie demanded. "Explain to me why you did not tell me you dated my sister. Why you asked me all those personal questions in the interview. Why you have been watching me like I am some kind of puzzle you are trying to solve." "Because I did not know how to tell you," Jonathan said, his voice raw. "When you walked into my office, I thought I was losing my mind. You look exactly like her, Sophie. For a moment, I thought maybe Claire had not really died. I know that sounds insane, but grief does that to you. So you hired me to what? Pretend I am her?" "No," Jonathan said forcefully. "I hired you because you were talented. Because even in that interview, I could see you have the same fire Claire had, the same innovative thinking. Yes, I was drawn to you because of the resemblance. I cannot deny that. But over this past week, watching you work, I have realized something important." "What?" Sophie asked, tears streaming down her face now. "You are not Claire," Jonathan said quietly. "You are your own person with your own strengths. And the way I feel when I am around you, it is not about her memory anymore. It is about you." Sophie shook her head, backing toward the door. "I cannot do this. I cannot be some replacement for the woman you lost. That is not fair to me, and it is not fair to Claire's memory." "You are right," Jonathan said. "It is not fair. I should have told you the truth from the beginning. But Sophie, please do not leave. We can figure this out." "I need time to think," Sophie said. "I need to figure out if anything about this job is real, or if it is all just because I look like her." She left before Jonathan could respond. Walking quickly past curious coworkers, ignoring Rachel's concerned call, she did not stop until she was outside on the street. The cold November air shocking her system, Sophie pulled out her phone and looked at that picture of Claire again. "Why did you not tell me about him?" she whispered. "Why did you keep him a secret?" But she knew why. Claire had always kept her romantic life private, especially after their mother had pressured her about settling down. And then she had died before she could share this part of her life with Sophie, a sister's journal that night. Sophie could not sleep. She kept thinking about Jonathan's words, about the pain in his eyes when he talked about losing Claire. Around midnight, she found herself digging through a box she had not opened in years. It contained Claire's belongings. Things their parents had sent to Sophie after the funeral. Most of it was clothes and books. But at the bottom, Sophie found Claire's journal. She had never been able to bring herself to read it before. It felt too much like invading her sister's privacy. But now, she needed to understand. She opened it to entries from 5 years ago. Claire's handwriting filled the pages with excitement about her new job, her life in Chicago, and then, starting in March, mentions of someone named Jay. "Met someone incredible today at the conference," one entry read. "His name is Jonathan. He is smart and funny, and when he looks at me, I feel like he really sees me. Not just the confident exterior I show everyone, but the scared girl underneath who is still figuring everything out." Sophie kept reading, watching her sister fall in love through the pages. Jonathan featured in almost every entry for months. Claire wrote about their dates, their conversations, the way he challenged her to be better. "Jay asked me to move in with him," one entry from July read. "I am terrified, but also so happy. I never thought I could feel this way about someone. He makes me want to be brave, to take risks. He reminds me of Sophie in that way, always believing I can do more than I think I can." Sophie's vision blurred with tears. Claire had been happy, really happy. And then, just a week before the accident, the final entry. "Jay has been acting nervous all week. I think he might propose soon. I am ready to say yes. I wish Sophie could meet him. I think they would understand each other. They are both the kind of people who see potential in everything. Maybe at Christmas, I will bring him home. Maybe I will finally tell my family about this wonderful man who loves me exactly as I am. Sophie closed the journal, her heart breaking all over again. Claire had been planning to introduce Jonathan to the family. She had been about to say yes to his proposal, and then a drunk driver had stolen all of that future in an instant. For the first time, Sophie understood the depth of what Jonathan had lost. And she understood something else too. He was not trying to replace Claire. He was just a man who had loved deeply and never fully healed the decision Monday morning. Sophie stood outside Sterling Enterprises, watching people stream into the building. She had spent the entire weekend thinking, crying, and reading Claire's journal over and over. She had called in sick on Friday, unable to face Jonathan or the office. Now she had a choice to make. She could walk away, find another job, avoid the complicated mess of Jonathan Hayes and his connection to her sister. It would be the safe choice, the practical one. Or she could walk through those doors and fight for something Claire had believed in. Not just the job, but the possibility that sometimes the universe connected people for reasons beyond. Understanding, Sophie thought about what Claire had written. He makes me want to be brave, to take risks. She took a deep breath and walked inside. Jonathan was in his office when Sophie knocked. He looked up, surprise and hope crossing his face in equal measure. I read Claire's journal, Sophie said, before he could speak. She loved you very much. She was going to say yes when you proposed. Jonathan's expression crumbled. I never got the chance to ask her, he said quietly. I know, and I am sorry for that. I am sorry you lost her. Sophie walked further into the office. But Jonathan, I cannot be her for you. I will never be her. I know that, Jonathan said. Sophie, this past week without you, I have done a lot of thinking too. When you walked out, I realized something. The pain I felt was not about losing Claire again. It was about losing you. Somehow, in just 1 week, you became important to me. Not as Claire's replacement, but as yourself. Sophie felt her heart race. This is complicated. I know. People will talk. They will say you are trying to recreate what you lost. Let them talk. I will need you to be honest with me, Sophie said firmly. Can you see me as separate from her? Can you see Sophie, not just Claire's twin? Jonathan stood and walked around his desk until he was standing directly in front of her. When I look at you, I see someone brilliant and determined. I see someone who stays late perfecting her work, even when she is exhausted. I see someone brave enough to call me out when I am wrong. That is not Claire. That is all you. Sophie searched his face, looking for any hint of deception. All she saw was sincerity and something that looked like hope. I need time, she said finally. I need to figure out who I am in this job without wondering if every opportunity you give me is because of her. Can you give me that? Yes, Jonathan said immediately. Whatever you need, I need you to be patient. I do not know if I can separate my feelings about you from my grief about Claire. It is all tangled up together, I understand. Sophie nodded slowly. Okay then, I will stay. But we keep things professional. Just boss and employee for now. For now, Jonathan agreed. And something in his smile made Sophie's stomach flutter. As she turned to leave, Jonathan called her name. Sophie, thank you for giving me a chance. For giving us a chance. Sophie paused at the door. Claire wrote that you made her want to be brave. I think it is my turn to try that. She left Jonathan standing in his office. And for the first time since the funeral 5 years ago, Sophie felt like she was stepping out of her sister's shadow and into her own light. Whatever happened next between her and Jonathan Hayes would be their story, not an echo of the past. The road ahead was uncertain and complicated. But as Sophie settled back at her desk and opened her laptop, she felt something she had not felt in years. She felt alive with possibility. 3 weeks passed in a rhythm Sophie had not expected. She and Jonathan maintained careful professional distance during office hours, but something had shifted between them. It was in the way he lingered during project meetings, always asking for her opinion first. It was in the coffee that appeared on her desk every morning, black with one sugar, exactly how she liked it. It was in the way their eyes met across conference rooms, and something unspoken passed between them. The horizon. Tech campaign was thriving under Sophie's leadership. Even Victoria had softened, admitting that Sophie's bold vision was exactly what the client needed. The team had gelled, and Sophie finally felt like she belonged at Sterling Enterprises on her own merit. Not because of any connection to Claire, but late at night, alone in her apartment. Sophie still struggled with the complexity of her feelings. How did you fall for someone who had loved your sister first? Was it betraying Claire's memory, or honoring it? The questions kept her awake more nights than she cared to admit. Rachel had become an unexpected ally during this time. One afternoon, she found Sophie staring at her computer screen without really seeing it. "Lunch?" Rachel suggested. "You look like you need to get out of this building." They went to a small cafe down the street. Over sandwiches, Rachel studied Sophie carefully. "He is different with you, you know," Rachel said finally. "Different how?" Sophie asked. "When Jonathan was with Claire, he was happy, but there was always this intensity to their relationship, like they were both trying to prove something. With you, he seems more settled. More like himself." Rachel paused. "But that is not why I brought you here. I wanted to tell you something about the night Claire died." Sophie set down her sandwich, her appetite suddenly gone. "Jonathan was supposed to pick her up that night," Rachel continued. "He had the ring in his pocket. He was going to propose at dinner. But he got stuck in a meeting that ran late. Claire decided to take a cab instead of waiting. If he had left on time, if he had been the one driving her, she might still be alive. He has carried that guilt for 5 years." Tears pricked Sophie's eyes. "He blames himself. He does. And I think part of why he is so careful with you is because he is terrified of failing someone he cares about again." Rachel reached across the table and squeezed Sophie's hand. "But you are not Claire. You do not need him to protect you from the world. You need him to trust that you are strong enough to face whatever comes together." The presentation that changed everything. The following Tuesday was the big presentation for Horizon Tech. Sophie had worked tirelessly on the campaign, and the entire Sterling Enterprises leadership team would be watching, along with Horizon Tech's executives. It was her chance to prove herself completely. The night before, Sophie stayed late, refining her presentation. She was adjusting the final slide when Jonathan appeared at her door. "You should go home," he said. "Get some sleep." "You are ready. It's just a few more tweaks," Sophie murmured, not looking up. Jonathan walked into her office and gently closed her laptop. "Sophie, you are ready." She finally looked at him, and all the careful distance they had maintained seemed to evaporate. "What if I fail?" she whispered. "What if everyone realizes you made a mistake hiring me?" "That is impossible," Jonathan said firmly. "Because I did not make a mistake. You are one of the most talented people I have ever worked with. Tomorrow, you are going to walk into that conference room and show everyone what I already know. That you are brilliant. How can you be so sure?" "Because I have watched you pour your heart into this project. Because I have seen you stay late every night, pushing yourself to make something extraordinary. Because you care, Sophie. That is what makes you exceptional." They stood close enough that Sophie could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Jonathan," she said softly, "I am scared of more than just tomorrow's presentation." "I know," he said. "I am scared too." "Of what?" "Of messing this up. Of losing you the way I lost her. Of my feelings for you being too much, too soon." He reached up and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "But I am more scared of not taking this chance." Sophie's breath caught. "We said we would keep things professional. You know what we said? And if you need more time, I will wait. I will wait as long as you need." His hand lingered near her face. "But Sophie, I need you to know that how I feel about you has nothing to do with Claire anymore. When I look at you, I see the woman who challenges me every day to be better. I see someone passionate and brave. I see you." Sophie closed her eyes, feeling tears threaten. "I am not ready," she whispered. "Not yet. Tomorrow's too important, and I need to focus." "Okay," Jonathan said immediately, stepping back. "Tomorrow, you show them what you are made of. Everything else can wait." But as Sophie gathered her things to leave, she found herself pausing at the door. Jonathan. After tomorrow, after the presentation, can we talk? Really talk about what this is between us? His smile was soft and genuine. I would like that very much. The triumph the presentation was scheduled for 2 o'clock. Sophie arrived at the office at 7, running through her talking points, checking every detail. The conference room had been set up with a large screen, comfortable chairs for the dozen executives who would be attending. By 1:30, Sophie's hands were shaking. The Horizon Tech team arrived first, 3 executives in expensive suits who looked skeptical from the moment they walked in. Then came Sterling Enterprises' leadership team, including the senior partners who ultimately decided which accounts the company pursued. Jonathan was the last to enter. He caught Sophie's eye and gave her a small, encouraging nod. "Good afternoon, everyone," Sophie began, her voice stronger than she felt. "Today I am going to show you how Horizon Tech can revolutionize the way people think about personal data management." For the next 45 minutes, Sophie presented her campaign. She had crafted a narrative that positioned Horizon Tech not just as another app, but as a movement toward digital autonomy. Her visuals were striking, her messaging was clear, and her passion was evident in every word. She talked about the emotional journey users would take, from feeling overwhelmed by their scattered digital lives to feeling empowered by Horizon Tech's unified platform. She showed mock-ups of advertisements that felt more like art than marketing. She presented a social media strategy that would turn users into advocates. When she finished, the room was silent. Sophie's heart sank. Had she misread everything? Was it too bold, too different? Then the CEO of Horizon Tech started clapping. "That," he said, "is exactly what we have been looking for. You did not just sell us a marketing campaign. You showed us what our company could mean to people." The room erupted in discussion, everyone talking at once. Sophie caught Jonathan's eye across the table, and the pride in his expression made her feel like she could fly. The meeting continued for another hour as they discussed implementation details and timelines. By the time everyone filed out, Sophie was exhausted but exhilarated. She had done it. She had proven herself. Jonathan was the last to leave the conference room. "Walk with me," he said quietly. The rooftop confession. Jonathan led Sophie up to flights of stairs, to a door marked "Roof Access, Authorized Personnel Only." He produced a key and pushed it open, revealing a small rooftop garden that Sophie had not known existed. "This is my thinking spot," Jonathan explained as they walked out into the late afternoon sun. "I come up here when I need perspective." The view was breathtaking. They could see all of downtown Chicago, the buildings gleaming in the golden light. Sophie walked to the edge, gripping the railing, letting the wind cool her flushed face. "You were incredible today," Jonathan said. Coming to stand beside her, "I was terrified," Sophie admitted with a laugh. "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting despite it." Turned to face her fully. "Sophie, I have been thinking about what you said last night. About talking after the presentation. I need to tell you something." Sophie turned to him, her heart suddenly racing for reasons that had nothing to do with the presentation. "When Claire died, I shut down," Jonathan said. "I threw myself into work because it was the only thing that made sense. I built Sterling Enterprises into what it is today, but I did it at the cost of really living. I told myself I would never let anyone get close again because losing her had nearly destroyed me." "Let me finish," he said gently. "Then, for weeks ago, you walked into my office, and I felt something I thought was dead. At first, I told myself it was just the shock of seeing Claire's face again. But it was not that. It was you. The way you answered my questions with honesty instead of polish. The way you admitted you needed the job but still demanded respect. The way you have fought for your place here without ever using your connection to Claire as leverage." Sophie felt tears building behind her eyes. "Over these past weeks, watching you work, talking with you late at night, I have fallen for you, Sophie Mitchell. Not for Claire's memory. Not for what could have been. For you, exactly as you are. Your determination, your creativity, your kindness. The way you make me laugh. The way you challenge me to see things differently." "I am scared," Sophie whispered. What if people think I am just trying to take Claire's place in your life? Then we show them they are wrong. We build something that is ours, not an echo of the past. Jonathan took her hands in his. I know this is complicated. I know there are 1,000 reasons why we should not do this. But Sophie, life is short. I learned that the hardest way possible. I do not want to waste the chance I have been given to be happy again. Sophie looked down at their joined hands, then up at his face. She saw sincerity there, and vulnerability, and hope. She thought about Claire's journal, about how her sister had written that Jonathan made her want to be brave. Claire wrote that you made her want to take risks, Sophie said softly. I think she would want us to take this one. You think so? I know so. She loved you, Jonathan. And she loved me. I do not think she would want either of us to be alone, because we were too scared to try. Sophie took a shaky breath. I have feelings for you too. They terrify me because they are so strong, but they are real. They are mine. Jonathan's smile was brighter than the setting sun behind him. Can I kiss you? He asked. Sophie nodded, her heart pounding. Yes. He cupped her face gently, giving her every chance to pull away. But Sophie did not want to pull away. She wanted this moment, this choice, this new beginning. When their lips met, it was nothing like Sophie had imagined. It was better. It was gentle and sweet and full of promise. It was not about Claire or the past. It was about two people choosing to move forward together. When they finally pulled apart, Sophie rested her forehead against Jonathan's. We take this slow, she said. I still need time to figure out how to separate my grief from my feelings for you. And you need to keep working through your guilt about Claire's death. Agreed, Jonathan said. Slow is good. We tell people the truth. About Claire, about how we met. I do not want secrets. No secrets, Jonathan promised. They stood on the rooftop as the sun set over Chicago. Holding each other, not saying much. They did not need to. The important words had been said. 6 months later, Sophie stood in the same conference room where she had given her Horizon Tech presentation, but today was different. Today, she was being promoted to creative director, the youngest person to ever hold the position at Sterling Enterprises. Jonathan stood at the front of the room, outdressing the assembled staff. Sophie Mitchell has proven herself to be an invaluable asset to this company. Her innovative thinking and tireless dedication have resulted in 3 major account wins in just 6 months. It is my pleasure to announce her promotion. The room erupted in applause. Sophie caught Victoria's eye, and the older woman smiled genuinely, giving her a thumbs up after the celebration. After the champagne and congratulations, Sophie found herself back on the rooftop with Jonathan. I am proud of you, he said, pulling her close. I am proud of me too, Sophie said with a laugh. 6 months ago, I could barely pay my rent. Now I am a creative director. You earned every bit of it, Jonathan said firmly. Then, more softly, I have something for you. He pulled out a small velvet box, and Sophie's breath caught. But when he opened it, instead of a ring, there was a delicate silver necklace with a small pendant shaped like 2 intertwined stars. I am not proposing, Jonathan said quickly, seeing her expression. We agreed to take things slow, and I mean it. But I wanted you to have something that represents us. 2 stars, separate but connected, making something beautiful together. Sophie felt tears stream down her face as Jonathan fastened the necklace around her neck. It is perfect, she whispered. You are perfect, Jonathan corrected. Not because you are flawless, but because you are real. You are brave enough to take risks, compassionate enough to honor Claire's memory while building your own life, and strong enough to love someone as broken as I was. You're not broken, Sophie said fiercely. You are healing. We both are. Together, Jonathan said. Together, Sophie agreed. They kissed as the sun set once again. And Sophie thought about how life had a way of bringing people together in unexpected ways. She thought about Claire and hoped her sister was watching somehow. Happy that the 2 people she had loved most had found each other, Sophie was not living in Claire's shadow anymore. She was not trying to replace her sister or fill a void in Jonathan's heart. She was simply Sophie Mitchell, creative director, girlfriend of Jonathan Hayes, and a woman who had learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is allow yourself to be happy. Epilogued 2 years later. Sophie stood in a small art gallery in downtown Chicago. The walls were covered with photographs from Sterling Enterprises campaigns, including several of Sophie's award-winning designs. It was a company anniversary celebration, and the entire team had turned out. Jonathan found her standing in front of a particular photo, one from the Horizon Tech campaign that had started everything. "Thinking about that day?" he asked, slipping his arm around her waist. "Thinking about how far we have come," Sophie said, leaning into him. On her left hand, simple diamond ring caught the gallery lights. Jonathan had proposed 3 months ago on the same rooftop where they had first kissed. Sophie had said yes without hesitation. Rachel appeared with champagne glasses. "To the power couple of Sterling Enterprises," she toasted. Sophie laughed. "Is that what they are calling us?" "Among other things," Rachel said with a wink. "But mostly, people are just happy to see you both happy." As the evening wore on, Sophie found herself thinking about Claire less with grief and more with gratitude. Her sister had brought Jonathan into her life, even if neither of them had known it at the time. Claire's love had laid the foundation, and Sophie and Jonathan had built something new on top of it. "What are you thinking?" Jonathan asked as they drove home that night. "That life is strange and beautiful," Sophie said. "That sometimes the worst things lead to the best things. That love does not replace love. It just grows." Jonathan reached over and took her hand. "I love you, Sophie Mitchell. Not because of who you remind me of, but because of who you are." "I love you too," Sophie said. "And I think we are going to be okay." "Better than okay," Jonathan corrected. "We are going to be extraordinary." And as they drove through the Chicago night, Sophie knew he was right. They had taken the broken pieces of their pasts and forged something whole and beautiful. They had honored what came before while building something entirely their own. It was not the story anyone would have expected, but it was their story, full of second chances, healing, and a love that had grown from the shadows of yesterday into the bright promise of tomorrow.